Every single morning at exactly 6:12 a.m., the automatic glass doors of the hospital would slide open with a soft, mechanical sigh. And every morning, before any nurse arrived, before the first doctor grabbed their coffee, the cat was already there. He was grey, thin. His fur looked permanently damp, as if the world had forgotten to dry him. One ear was slightly bent, the kind of mark life leaves when it hasn't been gentle. He didn't meow. He didn't beg. He didn't move. He simply sat in front of the entrance, tail wrapped tightly around his paws, staring straight ahead, not at people, but through them, as if he was waiting for something no one else could see. At first, the staff assumed he was just another stray. Hospitals attract leftovers, warm air, kind people. That's what they told themselves. But days passed, then weeks. The cat never changed his routine. Rain poured down, soaking his fur until it clung to his bones. He stayed. Cold mornings numbed the pavement. He stayed. Security guards tried shooing him away. He ran a few steps, then came back and sat in the exact same spot. What disturbed people wasn't that he stayed. It was how he stayed. He ignored food, ignored water, ignored every attempt at affection. But whenever the glass doors opened, his eyes would widen just a little. Hope would flicker, and then disappear. To be honest, that's when the discomfort began. Because that wasn't the look of a hungry animal. That was the look of someone waiting for a promise to be fulfilled. One night, during a violent storm, a young nurse wrapped in her coat noticed him shaking uncontrollably. She crouched down, whispering softly, trying to coax him away from the wind. For the first time, the cat reacted, not by running, but by lifting his head and locking his eyes on the hospital hallway beyond the glass, specifically one direction, the intensive care unit. And that's when a senior doctor, who had seen far too much to believe in coincidences, stopped walking. He followed the cat's gaze, and everything began to change. The senior doctor slowed his steps, then stopped completely. He had walked these halls for over 20 years. He had seen miracles that made no sense, and losses that felt unfair. But something about that cat, sitting so still in the storm, eyes fixed on the same corridor, unsettled him. "Why there?" he murmured to himself. The doctor crouched beside the glass doors. The cat didn't flinch, didn't hiss, didn't run. He simply kept staring. The doctor followed the line of sight, down the hallway, past the reception desk, past the elevators, straight toward the intensive care unit. Inside the ICU, there was only one patient who matched the timeline of the cat's arrival. An elderly man, unconscious, no visitors, no family listed, no phone calls. The chart said he'd been brought in 3 weeks earlier after collapsing on the sidewalk. Witnesses claimed he hadn't been alone. According to the report, a grey cat had refused to leave his side until paramedics physically separated them. Most people had ignored that detail. The doctor didn't. Later that night, the cat was still there, wet, silent, watching. A security guard suggested calling animal control. "That cat doesn't belong here," he said. "Rules are rules." And that's when the question hit. The kind of question that doesn't leave you alone. If you were in charge, would you follow the rules or listen to something you can't explain? The doctor hesitated. He thought about the man in the ICU, alone, suspended between breaths. He thought about the cat, refusing food, refusing warmth, refusing to give up. Finally, he made a decision that could cost him his job. He signed a temporary exception. For 5 minutes, they carried the cat through the sterile hallways. Nurses watched in disbelief. No one spoke. It felt wrong, and yet somehow right. Inside the ICU, machines hummed softly. The elderly man lay motionless, tubes tracing fragile lines across his chest. The moment the cat saw him, something changed. The animal let out a sound no one expected, a low, trembling cry, barely audible. At that exact second, the heart monitor stuttered, then steadied. The room fell silent. No one moved, because every single person in that room understood one thing at once. This was no coincidence, and whatever bond existed between that man and that cat, it wasn't finished yet. No one spoke, not the nurses, not the doctor, not even the security guard who had insisted the cat didn't belong there. All eyes were fixed on the monitor. Moments earlier, the numbers had been unstable, fragile, flickering like a candle fighting the wind. Now, they were steady, calm, almost obedient. The cat sat beside the hospital bed. He didn't jump, didn't paw at the tubes, didn't panic. He simply stared at the man's face, eyes unblinking, as if memorizing every detail, the wrinkles, the faint tremor in his jaw, the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Then, slowly, the cat stood up. He placed one paw on the edge of the bed. A nurse inhaled sharply, ready to intervene. The doctor raised his hand. "Wait!" The cat leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently against the man's arm. And that's when it happened. The man's fingers moved, just slightly, but unmistakably. The heart monitor responded instantly, emitting a steady rhythm that filled the room, stronger than before, more confident. One nurse covered her mouth, another felt tears blur her vision. To be honest, this was the moment science ran out of explanations. They had seen patients react to voices, to touch, to pain, but to a cat? The doctor checked the vitals again. Oxygen levels were improving. Blood pressure stabilized. Against all odds, the man was responding. They allowed the cat to stay longer than planned. Minutes passed, then half an hour. The cat never left the man's side. At one point, the doctor leaned closer and whispered, almost embarrassed by his own curiosity, "Do you know him?" The cat's ears twitched. That was all, but it was enough. Later that night, after the cat was gently escorted back to the entrance, the doctor returned to the patient's chart. He flipped through the pages until he found a note written in shaky handwriting, added just before the man lost consciousness. Name, Samuel Reed. Lives alone. Only family. My cat, Milo. The doctor closed the file. Now everything made sense. This wasn't an animal wandering into a hospital. This was loyalty walking in on four paws. And it wasn't done yet. Morning light filtered softly through the ICU windows. For the first time in weeks, Samuel Reed took a breath that didn't feel borrowed. His eyes fluttered, confused, unfocused. Machines still surrounded him, but the weight pressing on his chest had lifted. A nurse noticed the change immediately and called for the doctor. "Samuel," the doctor said gently, "can you hear me?" Samuel swallowed. His voice came out weak but clear. "My cat," he whispered. "Where's my cat?" The doctor froze. Of all the questions Samuel could have asked, his name, the date, where he was, this was the one that mattered most. "You have a grey cat," the doctor said carefully. "His name is Milo." Tears slid down Samuel's temples. "I promised him," Samuel murmured. "I told him I'd come back." Later that day, against every standard protocol, and after far too much paperwork, the doctor made another exception. Milo was brought in again. The moment the cat entered the room, Samuel's heart rate lifted, not dangerously, but joyfully. Milo leaped onto the bed with a strength no one expected from such a thin body. Samuel laughed, a broken, breathless laugh, but a real one. People say animals don't understand promises. They're wrong. Samuel had rescued Milo years earlier from an alley behind a grocery store. Since then, it had always been just the two of them. No family, no visitors, just shared meals, shared silence, shared survival. When Samuel collapsed on the street, Milo had followed the ambulance. When the doors closed, Milo had waited, day after day, storm after storm, not because he understood hospitals, but because he understood love. Samuel recovered slowly. When he was finally discharged, Milo walked beside him, tail high, eyes alert, as if escorting him home. The hospital doors slid open one last time. This time, the cat didn't stop to wait. And before you go, tell me, what's the name of the animal that would wait for you like that? Leave it in the comments. Their loyalty deserves to be remembered. Weeks passed, but the hospital never quite went back to normal. Staff members still caught themselves glancing at the entrance every morning at 6:12 a.m., half expecting to see a thin grey cat sitting perfectly still by the glass doors. But Milo never returned. And somehow that absence said everything. The nurses talked about him during night shifts. The security guards mentioned him to newcomers. Even doctors, people trained to trust data over feelings, spoke about the cat in lowered voices, as if saying his name too loudly might break something sacred. What stayed with them wasn't just the miracle. It was the reminder. They had treated Samuel Reed as another anonymous patient, a chart, a bed number, a prognosis. But Milo had seen him differently. He hadn't seen tubes or machines. He hadn't seen statistics or odds. He had seen his person. To be honest, that realization unsettled many of them, because if a cat could recognize something worth waiting for, day after day, without food, without warmth, without certainty, what excuse did humans have when they gave up so easily? Samuel later sent a handwritten letter to the ICU staff. In it, he wrote only a few lines. "You saved my life with medicine, but my cat saved it with loyalty. Please don't forget that both matter." The letter was framed and hung near the nurses' station. And from that day on, something small but meaningful changed. Doctors started asking more questions about patients' lives. Nurses paid closer attention to photos on bedside tables. Security guards were a little slower to chase away animals waiting outside. Because sometimes the thing keeping someone alive isn't on a monitor. It's waiting for them at home or outside a hospital door. Milo never needed recognition. He never needed praise. He kept a promise and went home. And maybe that's the lesson that stays with us. Love doesn't speak, it waits. Now tell me, what animal in your life would wait for you, no matter how long it took? Write their name in the comments. Stories like these deserve to live on.